going to be talking about boundaries. And I will have to say first that I am not a parenting expert, but um, I do have 4 kids, and I've been parenting them for 15 years now. My oldest just turned 15. So it just kind of comes from experience and things that I've learned. So I posted on my blog about loving your child and how to show love to your child, and it kind of goes along. Actually, it really goes along well um, with um, with the boundaries things that we're going to talk about today. So if you go over to uncasually.wordpress.com, then you'll be able to see my post up there about do I think I called it Do I Love You? Catchy, huh? So that's what I did the blog post about. So read that. And then let me know if you have any questions. I didn't have any questions posted before I started. Um, but if you have any questions, go ahead and post them. So basically, I feel like that boundaries is showing love to your children. Okay. And what do I mean by boundaries? I mean that there is some sort of line drawn and that it's something that you don't want your children to cross, and that there are consequences to them crossing that line, and that there is some sort of response from you as a mom or as a parent that will happen if that line is crossed. Okay. So, for example, let's say that you have a boundary that you want your kids to be cautious around roads, right? That's an easy one. That's something that we probably all want for our children. Um, so the boundary would be I don't want you to, or no, I should start over. The boundary would be you are to be cautious around roads to the child. That's what it would be. The consequence of crossing that boundary would be you might get critically injured, you might get really hurt. That is the natural consequence that happens from crossing that boundary. Now, your response to something like that would be okay, well, we are going to hold hands as we cross the road. And when we get to the road, we are going to say out loud, look left, look right, look left again, and then cross. Okay, so that's going to be your response to help them learn and to help them like cross the road safely, right? So you can kind of use that same sort of guidelines for any boundary that you may have. And I feel like that there are different types of boundaries. So, like the first one would be safety. So, boundaries around safety, like the road thing that I was talking about. Also, boundaries about family values that you have, and also boundaries that you have just from your personal preference. So, safety boundaries, pretty basic, mostly common sense. It includes things like we do not touch hot stoves or pans. Uh, we, I don't know what else. We do not um, play on unmonitored digital devices. That would be a safety thing. So those are boundaries that would likely never change. Like you don't want your baby touching a hot stove. You don't want your teenager to touch a hot stove. Consequences are going to be the same. But the thing that is different is probably your response or how you lead and guide them through that boundary. So like with a toddler, you may tell them, okay, mommy is cooking, so you cannot come into the kitchen right now because I don't want you to get hurt if you were to touch the hot stove or a hot pan on accident. Well, when they're a teenager, you may be like just giving them a reminder, hey, remember to not use a hot pad when you I don't know, take the pot off the stove or something like that. It's going to change as your child grows and develops and learns, but also as they show you that they will not cross those boundaries too. So if you do have a child that will keep on coming and touching the stove and getting burned, then you're not going to move past those boundaries, and you may even create stricter boundaries. And yeah, because they just can't follow the first boundary. So um, the other one is family values, and this I think can range widely in between families. So I mean, this could include things like um, our family goes to church every Sunday. Maybe that's a boundary. Um, we don't allow drug or substance abuse in our family. A lot of families probably have that one, but I'll get to that later. It may be that our family uses please and thank yous with everyone. That could be some sort of family value. And the consequences to those types of boundaries would be kind of like things that you would teach your children as they grow. It's taught as part of your family value system, is really what it is. And that just having that value system and the reason for that value system could be different between families. So going back to like the drug and substance abuse, so some families may teach their children that the reason or the consequence for that boundary is that they have a family history of addiction. And so if you were to use drugs or substances in illegal ways, then you may get addicted because we have that in our family. But a different family may have that same boundary, but then they'll say the reason or the consequence for that is that it's illegal. You might go to jail. You might get in trouble in school. You might get in trouble with the law. So that might be the reason for their values. So that can change. And then also the responses that you have to your children could vary a lot too. So let's take the hot topic of vaping. If your response could be anywhere from grounding your child, maybe specifically from certain friends or activities, or it could be saying, all right, you were vaping, so now we are going to go to like some sort of instructional seminar or something together. Or it could be that you're stripping their room and starting from scratch on building trust and that kind of thing. It could be like a whole host of different things. Um, and I feel like that those are the types of responses that may be like a one strike, two strike, three strike thing too. So they kind of build on each other. Like your first, after one strike, your response would be different than like the third time that they do it or something. And the last type of boundaries that we're going to talk about today are the ones that probably change the most often. And those are the ones that are your personal preference boundaries. So that could be so many different things. And you probably know all sorts of boundaries that are in other people's families that you're like, oh, I don't understand that one. It's all just personal preference. It's how we want to raise our children or have our home or whatever. So, to determine those types of boundaries, though, um, you just need to think about what is really important to me. Because remember, there's going to have to be responses to crossing those boundaries. Okay. So, it really needs to be something that's important enough for you to actually act on and discipline on and teach about and all of that. So, I mean, that could be from everyone has to rinse their dinner plate and load it in the dishwasher. It could be that Legos are not allowed anywhere but on the table. It could be that children knocking on closed doors, like how important are different things in your life? Because that's all personal preference. Some people will be okay with it, some people aren't. So you just need to figure out what's really important to you. Um, and you can't have the consequence to any of your personal preferences to be because I said so. Okay? I know that's the easy answer to do, but that really doesn't teach your child anything. And if there's no real reason or teaching behind the boundary, then your child isn't going to follow it because they don't understand the importance of it. You don't have a way to back it up other than fear. That's not a loving way to raise your children. Um, so I feel like if you were to not have some sort of like real reason for a personal preference boundary, that you're really restricting your child's growth and ability to make choices because you're not teaching them anything. It's just, it is because I said so, and you're the child, I'm the parent, and you better do what I say. Um, I don't think that's going to be the most effective way to teach children, in my experience. So, yeah. So let's say your boundary is that your children need to rinse off their plate and load it into the dishwasher. So the consequence to crossing that boundary is things that you're going to be teaching your children, like it shows that you don't appreciate the people who prepared the meal if you do not help in cleaning up afterwards. It could be that it shows disrespect to your home, um, and because you're not taking care of the things in the home. It could be that it adds to the workload of chores, and all of those things could be the consequence of it too. All of those things are things that you can teach to your children. Um, and following that example, if your child doesn't follow that boundary, you could choose to do a lot of different things. Maybe some nights you're like, well, I'm just going to rinse them off for them. Okay. It could be that if you do that too often, though, that they're just not going to follow the boundary anymore. So you have to be careful about how often you let it slide. Um, you could just remind them to do it. You could ground them until they do it on a regular basis, whatever. So let me kind of throw a little wrench out there though. You know, kids aren't all the same age, aren't all at the same mental capacity, responsibility, whatever. So, can you make the same request of a 2-year old that you can to a teenager? Obviously not. So, with a 2-year old, though, you may still have that same boundary. Like, we are going to rinse our plates and load them in the dishwasher, but perhaps the 2-year old isn't physically able to do that. So, make it into something that you guys do together. Take the plate over to the sink, wash their hands and face, because those kids get dirty when they eat, and rinse off the plate, maybe even make up a little song about it and let them help you put it in the dishwasher. So that way, as they grow older and as they grow and develop, you can tell them, oh, well, now you can do this on your own, or why don't you try to do it on your own? And you can still have that established boundary. Now, with a teenager, they know how to do it, they're able to do it, so you can expect for them to do it, right? If you've been teaching them and be holding those boundaries. Now, the next thing is your response. So, this for these types of boundaries, it can be so different. Um, it could be that you are letting your children not follow that boundary and you're rinsing them off for them. Then at some point, you may be like, this boundary really isn't that important to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll do it instead. Well, that's fine. That's your prerogative. It's not something that's affecting their your family's value system or their safety. So go for it. Maybe you wake up one morning and decide you love cleaning or rinsing off dirty dishes. Then that's fine. You can end that boundary and you can change it to something else. Um, just let your children know and follow through is basically what I'm saying here. If you decide that it is still important to you and you guys have slacked off, then reintroduce the boundary. Be like, hey, guys, remember we're doing this. And if this doesn't happen, then this is the consequence. And if you don't follow through, then this is the response. This is what's going to happen. Um, so that all brings me to, I think, a really important point about boundaries. And that is your children will not learn if you are inconsistent. And I think that can be like the hardest part about boundaries and um, yeah, about boundaries and and parenting in general. Um, if you hold a boundary one day and then the next day it doesn't exist and it flip flops all over the place, then you're teaching your children to not trust what you say. And then when it comes down to something that is really super important to you, they're not going to listen. They're not going to understand that you really mean it, and it's going to cause more disruptive behavior in the future. Um, Now, if you're just inconsistent once in a while, maybe one week you're sick, another week you're just super tired or you're on edge about something, then that's life. That happens. We're all human. But if it's happening all the time and you're always giving in or you're always changing the boundary over a certain thing, then you can't expect to get any good results from trying to do a boundary and from not you probably won't be getting any good responses on doing any type of boundaries because um, the inconsistency kills trust. So if you can't follow through almost all of the time on a certain boundary or a certain request, then kids can't count on you that what you're teaching to them is true. Okay. And yeah, it's just going to lead to other problems. So that's kind of like what I've learned about boundaries and parenting kids. Um, Really, it takes practice. There's a lot of trial and error in it, and that's okay. But just knowing what really is important and thinking through the situation, thinking through, okay, if I have this boundary, why do I have that boundary? What's the reason? How can I teach that to my children, or how can I explain it to my children in an age appropriate way? Then thinking, okay, well, if they don't cross that bound, or if they do cross that boundary, what is it that I can do to help them learn and show some sort of response to them? And that again is age appropriate and is loving and can help. So think about that if you are having certain difficulties with particular children, or if you're having particular problems on a certain boundary, then reevaluate it. Look at it and think it all the way through, and then just try it. So again, if you guys are interested in learning more about loving your child and how to show that love through your parenting, go to my blog, uncasuallymom.wordpress.com. And if you have any questions or comments about this video, I would love to hear them. Talk to you guys later.